Good morning and welcome to Rising on this fateful day where Donald Trump has become the president. Niall, it is good to be with you as we prepare to parse these historic events.
It is good to be with you. I think we're probably both sleep deprived, as I imagine much of our audience is, whatever their ideological leanings, but we'll struggle through. Great to see you. What is on your radar, Robby?
Well, let's talk about that. Donald Trump has once again won the presidency, and he has done so convincingly. In the coming days and weeks, commentators will spill considerable ink trying to make sense of this result. Mainstream media figures must grapple with the fact that a seemingly disgraced, twice-impeached convicted felon, one frequently derided by them as a fascist and a racist, was defiantly reelected president. Moreover, he made major inroads with minority communities, vastly improved his totals in various states, is currently projected to win the popular vote. Now, make no mistake, this is a significant win for someone rendered not merely unelectable, but wholly evil by every elite media institution in existence. Pundits trying to understand how Trump could have possibly achieved this unthinkable comeback will focus on his message, his issues, and his campaign strategies. No doubt we'll be talking about that on the show as well. They'll investigate the aspects of Trump and Trumpism that makes him appealing to throngs of Americans that the mainstream media does not understand. But they might overlook the single most important contributing factor in Trump's victory. I'm not going to overlook it. I say this was not necessarily an affirmative vote for the candidate, but rather a negative endorsement of his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. Sorry to harsh her vibes, but it is unavoidable. Simply put, Harris was a disastrous candidate. No, that's tough to hear, but that's the truth. Now, admittedly, she had a tough job, given that she replaced the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, President Joe Biden, in the literal 11th hour. But keep in mind that Biden was historically unpopular. He bottomed out at a 38% approval rating. That made him the least popular president in 70 years. Now, some of that disapproval was due to his advanced age and obvious cognitive decline. In that respect, Harris was certainly an improvement. But the fundamental mistake of the Harris campaign, the single biggest mistake, the one that assured Trump's re-election, in my view, no matter how improbable it seemed to elite tastemakers, was assuming that a mere candidate swap would be sufficient. This was egregiously wrong. Biden was not merely unpopular because he was too old to serve as president. He was unpopular because the American voters dislike his policies on the issues that mattered most to voters: the economy, inflation, immigration. Majorities of voters solidly preferred Trump over Biden. Well before the June debate performance that doomed the incumbent president's candidacy, by the way. Voters remembered the Trump economy fondly, blamed Biden's policies for ever-worsening inflation. Once Harris was installed as the candidate, she had the opportunity to engage in a reset. While she always faced the inherent difficulty of distancing herself from an administration which she served, she had every opportunity to throw Biden under the bus and part ways with his policies. She could have criticized his economic setbacks, his foreign policy, which was especially unpopular in the must-win state of Michigan, and his border program. Yet, 1 month ago, when she appeared on The View, the host asked Harris if there was anything she would have done differently from Joe Biden. Her answer? There's not a thing that comes to mind. Let's watch that.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
That was an incredible mistake. In fact, that was the answer that lost her the presidency. The American people could not possibly have signaled any more strongly that they wanted a change, a fundamental break with the inflationary policies of the Biden administration. Harris did not run from these policies. She co-signed them. Indeed, there are several ways in which Harris, just going to say it, may have been a worse candidate overall than Biden. Now, it's true that Biden's rapidly declining mental state made him a likely loser in the 2024 election, but Biden, at least, he had a track record of winning previous elections. Harris's only foray into national presidential campaigns ended disastrously with her early exit from the 2019-2020 race. That was after she adopted a number of toxically unpopular progressive stances, many of which she was forced to shed over the course of the last 4 months. This rendered her a decidedly weak candidate. Again, say what you will about Biden, but he had the good sense not to alienate Pennsylvania voters by endorsing a fracking ban. Harris never ran away from Biden's record or pretended she represented some actual sea change in policy. Her pitch was Biden's second term overseen by a younger and more capable person. This pitch did not merely come up short, it vastly underperformed expectations. That's because voters wanted to part ways with both Biden and his inflationary policies. Now, whether Trump can deliver on his promises and restore the country's future certainly remains to be seen. But one thing is for certain. The decision to suddenly and dramatically install Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee without any change whatsoever to the Democratic Party's underlying policy agenda will be seen in retrospect as a foolish mistake. Americans don't want Biden. They don't want Bidenism either. Kamala Harris was more of the exact same.
So, listen, a lot of thoughts there, Robby. I will get to the meat of your argument.
I just got it out there.
You got it out there. You put it all out there on
reaction.
this historic morning. I think, you know, before I really engage with was Kamala a terrible candidate, I think sitting in this seat, I should say why I think a lot of Americans are pretty distressed this morning. And I think that is primarily because a person who, as you noted at the start of your radar, twice impeached, charged in 4 criminal cases, convicted in one of those cases, and perhaps most egregiously, someone who sparked and incited an attempt to overturn the last election in 2020, has been re-elected. And he's been re-elected, it seems, with a majority of the popular vote. And those events in 2020 are events that he has never apologized for his role in. And so to the majority of people who voted for him, that simply doesn't seem to matter. And I think for the people who voted against him, that's a pretty disturbing thing to have to grapple with. Now, on the point of Kamala Harris, I don't think she is a particularly fantastic candidate. I thought at the start of her run she seemed kind of okay-ish, and then it sort of took a dip back to the Kamala Harris I remember from her 2020 campaign, who was rather underwhelming. I guess the question I have about the points that you made in the radar is, like, it seems like the logical extension of that argument is she just wouldn't be a Democrat, right? That she would be so far to the center in your mind that she wouldn't, in fact, back really any Democratic priorities. And that would seem likely to lose and de-energize a lot of voters to me.
Well, we'll get into it on the rest of the show. There are ways in which I think she could have, I think on Gaza and Israel, she should have leaned more to the left.
Yeah.
I think that killed her in Michigan. We're going to talk about that more in the show. But there is evidence, and I'll admit, I was skeptical that effect was really going to matter very much. But no. You do see in Muslim Arab areas of Michigan, her getting absolutely slaughtered there because of her connection to Biden on that issue. So on that, she could have been more progressive. On some economic issues that I don't agree with end up being more popular than others, but I think she needed to break with Biden on immigration and the causes of inflation. And also, I'll bring it up. I understand why they swapped Biden out for her, because Biden really demonstrated himself not capable of campaigning, running the country, let alone campaigning. But this is someone who no one voted for her, did not fare well, it was not tested by a primary process. And I know I've been saying that for forever. And I'm not saying they could pick their candidate however they want, but the way they picked their candidate, they arrived at someone who the voters have rejected somewhat decisively. I won't say this is the biggest blowout election ever, but she's going to lose the popular vote. This seems like they did screw this up, in fact. Well, now, they were in a difficult position by the time Biden was getting out, but I don't know. Maybe they should have done an open primary. Better yet, Biden should have just not run for re-election, and they should have had her up against Josh Shapiro and Gavin Newsom and Buttigieg and whoever else, and then we would have seen. Given the shape that they were in, maybe that's all they can do, but it did not pan out. I
mean, she does appear to have fared the worst of any of the 3 candidates, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and herself, against Donald Trump. And, nobody in the Democratic Party can be happy about that. I think they were placed in an almost impossible bind, frankly, by virtue of Biden deciding to seek a second term in the first place. Then there was the catastrophic debate. It was seemingly clear, I think, that Biden was going to get annihilated if he remained the nominee. Now, then you get into a more complicated argument, it seems to me. Could you have looked past Kamala Harris and had an open primary? Could it have been, a Gretchen Whitmer, for example, or a Josh Shapiro? And I'm not really saying that this is right or wrong. I just think as a matter of realpolitik, you could not oust the sitting black female vice president in the Democratic Party as it is comprised right now.
I hear all that, but a lot of people got to be looking at the numbers and saying, man, she did worse with minorities than he did. She did worse with all categories. They had on the ticket the only guy who's beaten Trump, and they put him aside for someone else, and she lost catastrophically. I understand why, because his polling looked bad, but it was not a gamble that paid off at all. It was a gamble that failed miserably.
It was a gamble that failed, but I mean, I would say the Joe Biden even of 2020 was significantly different. Not vastly, not chalk and cheese, but significantly different from the Joe Biden on that debate stage in June 2024. And frankly, the Joe Biden who hampered Kamala Harris's chances a bit more in the closing stretch of this campaign with the garbage comment, with the lock him up, oh, I sort of meant lock him up politically comment. None of those things were helpful. I do think Biden would plainly have fared worse. It's just who else could you have got other than Harris?
Well, we've got a lot more coming up on Rising today. Amber Duke will be joining us to give us her take. We're going to be breaking down the numbers in various states. We're going to be looking especially at Michigan and how the Arab American vote impacted Kamala Harris. We're going to be looking at the Latino vote, which is Trump has made tremendous gains with that. So much to discuss. Please stay with us. Thanks for watching.